The night was quiet on the platform at Bescot Stadium railway station. The hum of distant traffic echoed under the fluorescent lights, flickering weakly against the metal rails. It was the kind of stillness that feels almost sacred, the calm before the storm. But within seconds, that silence would be shattered. A young woman, kind, hard-working, and completely unaware of what was coming, would be attacked in an explosion of violence so sudden and senseless, it would leave even seasoned investigators shaken. Her name was Rhiannon Whyte, and what happened to her that night wasn't just another crime. It was a senseless tragedy born out of anger and instability. Rhiannon Whyte was just 27 years old. She lived in Walsall in the West Midlands of England, a working-class town just north of Birmingham. Friends and co-workers described her as bright, polite, and hard-working, the kind of person who showed up, did her job well, and kept a smile on her face even when life wasn't so easy. Rhiannon worked at the Radisson-owned Park Inn Hotel, which had recently been converted into temporary accommodation for asylum seekers. The government's asylum housing scheme had turned hotels across the country into makeshift homes for migrants arriving in the UK. It wasn't glamorous work, and it could be challenging, but Rhiannon was known for her patience and professionalism. She didn't judge anyone. She believed in treating people with kindness, no matter their background or circumstances. It was part of who she was, compassionate, grounded, and trusting. But inside that same hotel, among the residents she saw daily, was the man whose mind was growing darker and darker by the day. His name was Deng Chol Majek, a 19-year-old asylum seeker from South Sudan. He had come to the UK illegally on a small boat on the 29th of July 2024, seeking refuge and a fresh start after being rejected in Germany. But instead of building a new life, he spiraled deeper into frustration and resentment. According to reports later presented in court, Majek had become increasingly aggressive and volatile in the weeks leading up to the attack. Staff members at the hotel had witnessed his odd behavior. He would stare at them in a strange and intimidating way. He wasn't known to Rhiannon personally, but their paths crossed daily through work. She was one of the members of staff responsible for helping manage the hotel's day-to-day operations, checking in residents, keeping order, and reporting issues when they arose. To Rhiannon, he was just another guest, but to him, she represented something else: authority, structure, maybe even rejection. Over time, Majek's behavior worsened. Reports described him as angry, unpredictable, and increasingly fixated on perceived slights. The staff tried to handle him professionally, but he was becoming a problem no one quite knew how to solve. In the days leading up to the killing, Majek's agitation reached a breaking point. Then, on the night of the 20th of October 2024, that frustration would finally boil over. Witnesses say Majek was staring at Rhiannon and her colleagues in the hotel reception in a manner described as intimidating, scary, and spooky. Then, as her shift ended, he deliberately brushed past Rhiannon's arm at reception on his way out for a cigarette. At 11 p.m, Rhiannon had just finished her shift at the hotel and was making her way home. She often travelled by train, using Bescot Stadium station, a small quiet stop mostly used by commuters and late shift workers. For Rhiannon, it was just another ordinary evening, but for Majek, it was something else. He had left the hotel not long after her. CCTV footage would later show him following her route, heading in the same direction. Just after 11 p.m, en route to the station, Rhiannon took a phone call from a friend who was asking where she was. She replied saying that she was heading to the station. But then, suddenly, the call went silent. Moments later, her friend heard a horrifying, high-pitched scream of terror. Passengers on passing trains later told the police they saw a struggle, a blur of movement, a flash of panic. Rhiannon fought back and tried to escape, but Majek's rage was overwhelming. He took out a screwdriver and stabbed Rhiannon 23 times, including 11 times into her skull, inflicting a brain injury that would prove fatal. Train staff arrived shortly after and found Rhiannon gravely injured, alone in a shelter on a platform. She was rushed to hospital, but unfortunately she died 3 days later on the 23rd of October. After the stabbing, Majek fled the scene. CCTV footage captured him running from the platform, blood on his clothes, disappearing into the night. Later he was spotted again, discarding Rhiannon's phone by throwing it into the River Tame. He then walked into a shop, bought a beer, returned to the hotel, changed his blood-soaked flip-flops for trainers, and then he was seen dancing with his friends in the hotel car park amidst emergency vehicles as though he was celebrating what he had just done. Hotel staff and a housing officer later described seeing him smoking, drinking and chatting with his friends as though nothing had happened. He showed signs of not remorse but rejoicing. The police response was swift. British Transport Police and West Midlands Police launched a joint investigation, combing through surveillance footage, witness accounts and forensic evidence. Within hours, they identified the suspect. Majek didn't make it far. Officers tracked him down the next day and arrested him on suspicion of murder. He was still wearing some of the same clothes seen on CCTV. The evidence was overwhelming. Forensic traces connected him directly to the crime scene. They seized items including a jacket, sandals, and a ring from Majek. They found Rhiannon's blood on them and discovered her DNA under his fingerprints, proof that she tried to defend herself. When questioned, Majek offered little explanation. Of course, he denied everything. His behavior during interrogation was described as cold and detached, showing little remorse for what he had done. It was clear that this wasn't a random act. Investigators determined that Majek had followed Rhiannon deliberately and attacked her intentionally. This was no accident. It was a cold and calculated murder. Over the following months, detectives pieced together the timeline. They built a detailed picture of Majek's life before the attack. His arrival in the UK, his placement at the Asylum Hotel, and his growing pattern of aggression. They also found documentation showing his true age to be 27, not 19. He was later found to be married and had a child. At the hotel there were warning signs, incidents of odd behavior, clashes with staff, and complaints from other residents. But no one could have imagined he was capable of something as horrific as this. Rhiannon's colleagues were devastated. They'd lost a co-worker and a friend, killed by someone she'd only ever tried to help. As the investigation progressed, prosecutors from the Crown Court Unit prepared the case for trial. They charged Majek with murder, arguing that his actions were premeditated and motivated by anger towards hotel staff. The trial began at Birmingham Crown Court in October 2025. Prosecutors laid out the horrific details of what happened that night. The staring, the pursuit, the attack on the train platform. CCTV evidence was shown to the jury, capturing the moments leading up to the murder. The court heard how Majek had armed himself with a screwdriver and followed Rhiannon home, waiting for the right moment to strike. Throughout the trial, Majek showed little emotion. He denied the murder, but evidence left little room for doubt. The jury watched as the prosecution meticulously reconstructed his movements, from the hotel to the train station and back again. The defense tried to argue that Majek hadn't intended to kill her, that it was a sudden, uncontrolled outburst. But the prosecution countered that he had every opportunity to walk away. Instead, he chose to follow her, confront her, and take her life. On October 24, 2025, after deliberating for just 2 hours, the jury delivered their verdict, guilty of murder. The judge described Majek's actions as a cold-blooded and senseless attack on an innocent woman who was simply doing her job. The courtroom was silent as the sentence was read. There was no apology, no sign of regret, just the reality of what he had done and the lives he had destroyed. Sentencing was postponed to verify Majek's true age. The court must first determine whether he is a youth or an adult for the purposes of his punishment. In the days after the verdict, tributes poured in for Rhiannon Whyte. Rhiannon's sister Alexandra said, "I'm raising Rhiannon's son, and I cannot express the unimaginable pain of having to sit him down and explain to a 5-year-old that one of the people he loves more than anything will never be coming home." Rhiannon is remembered as kind, hardworking, and full of potential, someone who deserved so much more than the fate that found her. Her death sparked renewed discussion about safety in asylum accommodation centres and the responsibilities of managing difficult residents. But for those who knew her, these were just words. None of it could bring Rhiannon back. She had been doing her job, helping people, trying to make a living in a system stretched to its limits. And for that, she lost her life. Rhiannon's name now stands as a reminder that every shift worker walking home deserves to arrive safely, that every act of stalking, of unpredictable violence, must be met with vigilance and response, and that in the aftermath of unspeakable loss, there is a duty to remember the victim, not just for the manner of their death, but for the life they lived, the work they did, the love they held. More should have been done to prevent something like this from happening in the first place. But then this is what happens when you let random people into the country illegally and give them asylum without even performing adequate background checks. After Majek committed this horrific murder, he was seen dancing and rejoicing. Were those the actions of someone who had just killed someone for the very first time? I don't think so. I'm sure that if they vetted him thoroughly in the first place, they would have found that he most likely had done this before, back in Sudan, and that's probably why he left in the first place, to escape punishment. And how many more of them are just waiting to strike upon unsuspecting members of the public? And how many more of them are still coming every single day? There has been a record-breaking small boat crossings into the UK. The government has to prioritise stopping this from happening. Otherwise, an incident like this will be one of many to come. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.